So we are going to share what we decided is very appropriate for this service about how we are connected in community, because this is a modern loaves and fishes story. It is just a little glimpse of what we experienced as the Border Justice delegation from this congregation last weekend.
Good morning. Good morning. I was privileged to return to Tijuana this last weekend as a participant in a UU Justice Ministry border trip. These trips have several purposes: to witness the ongoing plight of migrants at the border, as well as their needs, hopes, and dreams; to learn about the broken immigration policies of the United States and the lack of a path to legal immigration for millions of people; and to meet with and assist various groups in Tijuana, such as the Deported American Veterans, El Otro Lado, and the Colectivo Olencali, which fights for workers' rights in the maquiladora industry. These are the assembly and food production plants that produce goods for the United States and Canada under the terms of the NAFTA agreement. This was my second UUJM border trip. Having been on these trips with members of our church community, I can attest that each trip has touched my soul in different ways and truly impacted my life and my faith. The first UU principle of our living tradition is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. These trips let you witness the challenges people face: families and loved ones separated by politics, as well as a physical wall topped with razor wire. In the midst of such pain and difficulty, one also marvels at the stunning beauty and vibrancy of the community of Tijuana. For as many tears as you will shed, you will also share in the smiles, laughter, and common humanity of your fellow travelers. You will be heartened to see people volunteering in a multitude of ways, stepping up to do whatever they can to help others in need. You will get to meet incredible people, including the leaders of these trips, Mar, Dennis, Gary, and Johnny, who do this work tirelessly and selflessly. Lest I forget one of the best parts, you will also be treated to some of the best tacos you have ever eaten in your life. And who doesn't like tacos? It's something we can all agree on.
I'm going to share something a little more personal. I had to keep reminding myself, Sally, you are here to serve the migrants and asylum seekers, not to feed your curiosity. That's hard for me. So that means you don't ask what brought them here. You don't ask for ways to keep in touch. No exchanging of emails. Oh my God. The ministers were clear about this, but for me, this was a tall order. I yearned to find out their backstory. What's so bad about that? Asking about their backstory. And then I remembered what the ministers had explained. Don't risk re-traumatizing them. Don't ask them anything that ICE might get a hold of. Even though it's a long shot, it's still possible. Still, I argued with myself, the way I connect is through hearing someone's story. When that's not possible, what's left? Ha! As a UU, I might have figured out the answer. It's love. It was sooner than I had imagined that I had the opportunity to apply this love potion. As we began to arrange for the weddings, a shy couple approached Laura, Sally, and me, and asking us if we could be their witness in their marriage. This was thrilling. And I yearned to know more than just their first names, Sandra and Juliet from Honduras. The only tool I had was love. This approach didn't go particularly well. The first 2 times I tried to connect, I got nothing back. Oh, whoops. Getting something back isn't the point. I realized that I didn't need to know their story. I only needed to be reminded of our first and 7th principles, the inherent worth and dignity of all, and the interdependence of the web of existence. I don't think I even have that right yet. I knew what lay ahead for them: bleakness, uncertainty, months to years of not knowing. I wanted to infuse them with my belief that they could hang in there, that they had one another, that I loved them deeply without needing to know them at all.
We approach the border on foot, and I am overwhelmed with the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. Walking up a concrete walkway surrounded by steel, glass, concertina wire, atop the wall with military presence, that is a cold, lonely, and foreboding experience. I felt the tears, painful memories, fear, hopes, and dreams of the millions of migrants who have entered this cold monolith of a building longing for a promising, safer future in America. Shelter is a word I always assumed meant a building. Was that privilege? Yes. As we drive into Tijuana, I was saddened by the buildings barely standing and surrounded by debris. The poverty, heartbreaking. We then were told the city had built a sports-oriented park for those underserved families. This park has become the overflow shelter that you see on TV for the early arrivals of the caravan. Tents, cardboard lean-tos, blankets, people trying to sleep. This was the new overflow area for the new arrivals seeking asylum at the border. Definition of shelter I looked up: a place giving temporary protection from bad weather or danger. I saw no buildings, only people on concrete streets, grass or dirt, trying to rest, people hugging, talking, or many just staring with faces blank with exhaustion, trauma, and fear. Police hovering, providing protection to these newly arrived immigrants seeking asylum in America. A night together, enjoying those tacos, encircled in the warm hospitality of Gary Moore, our home for 3 nights of laughter, learning, worshiping, and bonding together in this intense shared experience. More learning Saturday morning from 2 brave female maquiladora workers. Then on to a coffee/lunch safe house for the LGBTQ community caravan splinter group who had arrived safely by bus from Mexico City a day before our arrival. We were welcomed in with open arms and hearts. I was pleasantly surprised to see trans women in varying stages of transition with makeup, jewelry, clothing fashioned into dresses, being their authentic selves as best they could, given their circumstances. There was hope and joy in the air. Also, rumors of a possible wedding. Suddenly, amidst this lively chaos, Sally Wright, Laura, and I were approached by 4 lesbian women pointing at us with smiles, asking us in their native language if we would be their witnesses. We managed to find someone to translate for us. We looked at each other and happily said, yes. We were honored, surprised, and pleased to do whatever we could to support these brave young lesbian women.
Let's just take a moment and thank Mark, Sally. We also want to thank Laura and Rodney, who could not be with us, but who were also part of our delegation. You know, some days are miraculous and unforgettable, and we had one of those days, all of us in this second iteration of our Border Justice Ministry. The way that this happened, the way we were asked to participate in these marriage ceremonies is that we asked, what do you need, when we entered into that coffee house? That's what we asked. We figured they needed someone to help in the kitchen, which some of us did do, or to help lift things or shop or move things, pack up. And what they said was, we need some weddings to happen. That was the answer the legal team provided, with the idea that some sort of religious ceremony, even if not legally binding, would make it less inevitable that partners would be separated from one another. Because people knew that when they cross the border, they are going into detention, because that is the welcome that our country is giving this caravan and all these asylum seekers. So this effort was simply to ensure that people not be separated on the other side of the border. It took us less than 5 minutes to agree that we would do a religious ceremony and another 45 minutes to meet with the couples and see if this was okay with them and what they needed. They said rings. Rings were very important. Within an hour, using the expanded community of Unitarian Universalism and the internet on phones, we had, with the assistance of a Catholic priest, we had a UU ceremony, a certificate in Spanish, and the permission to use the auspices of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, our global UU virtual congregation, as the congregation to base these ceremonies in, within an hour. Less than 4 hours later, we had, due to many busy hands, there were flowers and cakes, decorations, wedding attire, fancy guests, confetti, a ceremony, marriage certificates, rings. That was Mark's specific ministry, rings. He just kept running back and forth, buying more rings. And then we also had joy and hope. Frederick Buechner, who is a writer and theologian, said, "A miracle is what happens when the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. A miracle is when 1 + 1 = 1,000. The weddings we were privileged to be part of were miraculous in that sense. And yet what struck me was how they were possible because of intentional choices that have been made time and time again, small choices that added up to that large act of hope and affirmation that has been celebrated worldwide. We were, simply put, the right people at the right time. We were because we never asked whether we should not go on the trip because things were heating up at the border. No one challenged our host's plea to be flexible because they were working around the clock to serve the migrants in any way they could, and the needs were ever changing. No one questioned when our itinerary changed moment by moment. We were agents of the miraculous because we were willing to show up, and when asked to serve, we did. Because we were willing to hear what was needed rather than to make our own determinations as privileged people about what others needed. And when asked to do tasks, no matter how hard or how menial, no one in this delegation ever said no. No one put their own sense of importance or comfort or safety ahead of the needs of those who had so little of any of that. This delegation, which represented you at the border, did you proud, my friends. To stand in witness to the vows of 7 young couples and to be present to such a needed celebration and joy amid so much misery, hate, and uncertainty is unforgettable. To look into their faces even for a few moments, so tired, so young, and so determined, was a gift. To laugh with them and to witness to the power of their love and commitment was real. Each night on the journey, we ended with a reflective circle, and on the day of the weddings, that circle held so much gratitude and tears. We ended that night with a prayer that all the precious lives in the caravan might be held safe. For despite our intentions, despite our desires, we could not make that true. And yet we did not allow that to keep us from showing up as part of a global community of love and support and doing what we could. So for all our little inadequate parts, we helped create the miracle of hope for those who have and will endure so much pain and tragedy. And now we must continue to do, all of us, what we can to make sure that we can ask our country to be hospitable for we shall never forget them and their larger story.
En otros países pues no se ve esto y siempre lo habíamos querido y hoy que se nos da la oportunidad muy felices, la verdad muy felices.
They are enjoying this time, this moment, and that will help them survive everything that life throws, all the adversity that they're about to face.
As Mar Cardenas says in that video, all the atrocities they are about to face. Because we know that their journey doesn't end there, and that we have to continue creating space for those miracles. There's something in that video that is actually incorrect, though. The video says that there were 7 LGBTQ couples wed in that ceremony. There weren't. There were 6, and 1 heterosexual couple with a baby. This LGBT contingent was an example of what I have to call transgressive hospitality. This contingent of asylum seekers had to separate from the larger caravan for their own safety. They had to separate from a larger caravan that was constantly attacking them, that didn't welcome them. And yet, even facing that from the larger caravan, they took in this young family as one of their own. They practiced hospitality in a way that one would never expect. That, for me, was a part of the miracle that we shouldn't overlook. That transgressive hospitality that this LGBTQ contingent of asylum seekers practiced. Because it lives in stark contrast with what we see in our broader US policies, what is seen as acceptable in our majority narrative. When we went to visit shelters on the border, shelters back in San Diego, we saw young mothers with anklets on so that ICE could track them. As Reverend Leslie mentioned, Friendship Park was closed for that border service. So instead of being filled with families, it was filled with Border Patrol. Just this weekend, we saw that there was a new policy that the White House had worked on with the incoming Mexican government to keep asylum seekers in Mexico rather than allow them to cross until their cases are resolved, which, beloveds, takes years. And this is all against a backdrop of ongoing ICE raids, ongoing partnerships with county prisons that ICE has to house detainees. It comes up against this backdrop again of immigration policies rooted in white supremacy, scarcity, superiority, and imperialism, not in hospitality. And so we Unitarian Universalists, we need to learn from the transgressive hospitality that LGBTQ caravan showed. And we need to go against what has been the major narrative of hospitality. It is a time when what is defined as welcome, what is defined as policy must be countered with love, must be countered by us radical Unitarian Universalists. And there are ways that we can transgress with our hospitality. They include, as was demonstrated by our caravan, the commitment to re-educate and educate and re-educate ourselves, to not approach wanting to get something from our interactions, but approach knowing that the experiences of others go first. We can donate. Donations are some of the easiest things we can do from a distance, and you have in your order of service ways that you can give. And you all are lucky because the UUJMCA has a border trip coming up in February. So if you're interested in becoming the third delegation from MDUUC, keep your eyes open for that. Beloveds, we live in a world where so much says we can't, we shouldn't, we mustn't, we don't have the resources to welcome in people. But we describe this wedding as a modern loaves and fishes story, which draws on the story in the Christian New Testament where Jesus takes 5 loaves and 2 fishes and somehow feeds over 5,000. We can recreate this loaves and fishes story. We can. We have the resources. We must. Our family, our universal family, needs it.